Hi, I'm Laura Coyle, and in this video, we're going to be talking about making Halloween art in Adobe Illustrator. And this is something we did today in a Zoom call that's part of my online learning community. You can find out more about that on lauracoylecreative.com. Some of the things we talked about are greeting cards that I've made for Papyrus in the past, and what the process is of creating a greeting card, working with an art director, and going through the steps of starting with a sketch and then sort of blocking things out and making a composition, working back and forth and getting feedback, and then getting all the way to final art. But in this video, we're going to skip over that and we're going to go straight to working in Illustrator, and I have a lot of tips for you along the way. So let's take a look. I'm going to be recreating the witch character from this card, and let's go over to the artboard. I've got sort of a reference here of the witch, and then I'm going to draw it over here on this background. But first, I want to show you my inspiration. I love photo inspiration, and this is my favorite classic Hollywood actress, Joan Crawford, who is really amazing at wearing incredibly large shoulder pads, having a nice nipped in waist, and always a really intense and beautiful expression on her face. So I thought she would be the perfect 1940s IRS agent witch for us here. So I'm going to start by drawing with the pen tool, just getting a shape that's nice, and it's crude. I can always come back and work on it later, but I'm just sort of blocking things out. Sometimes I will have a pencil sketch in here that I'm following where it's locked on another layer and it's transparent. But in this case, because I have the finished art here, I can just sort of just draw off of that. And this is a black jacket. And then I'll zoom in here and make the skirt. So this is one of those kind of 1940s peplum skirted suits here. And let me make that skirt a little bit wider, and then put the jacket in front of it. Okay. And then I'll draw the arms separately because I just really like to have the flexibility of having things, separate so that I can move them or bend them however I want to later. So this is part of my sketching process here. If I had a pencil sketch, there would be that. But then at some point, you got to start blocking things out in Illustrator. And very often I'll work on this using grays and blacks, so I don't have to worry about the color at this stage, but I've already got color figured out and it's more fun to look at in color. So the first thing I'm going to do with this jacket is add a stripe pattern. I'm going up to the appearance panel to add another fill on top of this one. I just select this fill and then click the plus icon, and now I can go in to this mini swatch panel here and just pick my stripes. I have a stripe pattern already saved on my swatches panel, and then I'm going to just dial down the opacity so it's not quite so loud. And then I'm going to use the eyedropper tool to sample this to the other sleeves here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is something that I do a lot, which is nudging and re-registering, because what I want to do is create a shadow here, and whenever I create shadows, I want to borrow the shape that I already have, but then custom cut it. And I use the shape builder tool for this. So nudging and re-registering is really helpful because I want to do that cutting on copies of the shapes off to the side. So I'm going to select the skirt and the body of the jacket, and then I'm going to copy, paste in front, and then just use my arrow key on my keyboard to nudge it over to the side. You can fix your keyboard increment by going to Preferences, that's Command or Control K, and just type it in right here. So nudging by a pixel or nudging by a whole inch works great. Inch is better, of course, for this. And then I'll take the jacket, make a copy of it using Option or Alt, and give it a shadow color. And then I also want to add transparency. So I'll use Multiply, and let me dial that down a little bit. And then I'll put the original jacket in front, and this just gives me something to work with so I can see, how much of a shadow does it need to be, that peplum kind of casting that down. And then I need to make this even lighter because it's not really going to show up against the jacket very well. All right, so once I've got it kind of where I want it, then I'm going to use the shape builder tool to do the cutting. So I'm selecting all of those shapes and then going to Shift M, and there's the shape builder tool right there, and hold on the Option or Alt key for subtracting. So I'm just going to subtract away every shape here that is not the shadow. So I'm just taking out all of these right here. And now I'm left with this perfect cutout shadow, and I'll just nudge it back into place. So that's why nudging and re-registering is so helpful for that. Now let's see. She needs that blouse, that hot pink blouse there, and a collar. So sometimes when I'm working, because my style in Illustrator is just really, can be very graphic and simple, I like to work like this and work fast so I can get sort of my composition down. And then I can always come back in and, I'm sure I will do tons of adjusting. But since this is just a YouTube demonstration, I got to work fast and can't really do any serious detailing. All right, so I've got some buttons there. Now let's do the neck and the head. And again, I'm using just a rectangle, but that's probably something I would go back in and work on. Try to make it more special. But ellipses are great for heads. And here's another thing. When you're, working on the size of it as you're drawing it out, if you hold the space bar, you can suspend drawing for a moment and just reposition it wherever you want it. So that's how I kind of just work on figuring out the size of it, how big I want it, and where I'm going to position it using the space bar. And then let's get that color fixed. All right, let me back up and see. That looks like it's about close to the right size. Of course, I've made her shoulder pads much larger and more menacing. Oh well. All right. So I'm going to point the chin here by selecting that anchor point and clicking on the convert anchor point there just to remove the handles. And now this is a pointy chin. And then I'll hold shift to drag these handles down in a straight line just to give it a little bit, make it a little less severe there. Now I'm going to use the pen tool to draw the eye shape. So I'm starting with one point there and here. And now I'm going to use the Option or Alt key to break this handle, and that way I can sort of make this almond eye shape. And I'm not sure if you can really see that pink there, so let me double click on the layer and let's do blue. I don't know how that happened. I think these are going to be a little bit easier for you to see here. Something is happening. Oh, it's reversing that for some reason. Okay, something weird is happening. I don't know why it keeps snapping back, but that to me, that seems buggy. Let me go back to my pen tool, hold down on the Option or Alt key. I love it when I'm making a tutorial and Illustrator decides to be, wonky. Okay, there's my eye. Now I'm going to make the eyelid by copy and paste in front once again. So you can use the shortcuts, or if you have this new bar open, the contextual taskbar, which you can find here in the window menu, there it is. This shows up below the object that you have selected, and it's got a duplicate button on it here. So if I click the duplicate button, I can nudge it aside to show you that there is a duplicate right on top of the other. And then I'll make this black. That's the shade of her eyeshadow. And then I will go, let's see, Shift E to get the eraser tool. Eraser tool, you can make it larger or smaller using the bracket keys like you can with brushes anywhere else. And then I'm just going to erase away to make the eyelid there. And if you need to go back in and refine this, of course you can do that. I'm going to try really hard not to fuss with this too much so we can keep this tutorial moving along. All right, so there's my eye. And I'm going to group these together, these three shapes, group them. And again, it'll just duplicate clicking on that button and make a copy of it, just stretching it out there. And, generally when I'm working on a character, I might not copy one eye to the other. I might want them to be separate so that I can, make them a little different so they look a little slightly more interesting. Okay, so but for this will do. All right, let me put some highlights on here. I'll use this light blue color and I'll copy that over here. Okay, so another thing that I really love is eyebrows. So I'm going to get the pen tool and let's switch the fill and the stroke. I want this stroke to be black and I'm just going to make a curve right here. And then I'll thicken that stroke up. How thick do I need it? Maybe not quite that thick. Okay, so eyebrows to me are like the easiest way to make something happen with a character. I mean, the more you sort of finesse it and tilt it, even when it's so simple like this, it really changes the expression. So later on, I may go back and expand this and then kind of work with the anchor points to make it not quite such a plain shape like that. But, you know, I'm blocking this out and I kind of like the way that looks anyway. Now what I want to do is the nose shape, and I'm just going to do something super, super simple here. A triangle, Shift X, flips the fill and the stroke. It's like hitting this little double arrow button here. And let me make that fill instead of black. Let me make it green like this. Okay, now here's another thing. When you're working with the pen tool, you know, before I held down the Option or Alt key to be able to break the handle so that I could change the direction of the curve. You can also hold down the Option or Alt key and hover over a segment on a path like that, and then you can just bend it. So this makes just contouring that really nice and easy. And since we're working in green now, I've got to change that color so you can see it a little bit better. And, you know, another super quick thing that you can do is just round a single corner by selecting it with the direct selection tool. And then I'll just finish out with some plain old shapes here to make this nose. And I've got to move this out of the way because it's gonna bug me. Okay, she needs a wart like that. And okay, so now we have a nose. It could be worked on, it could be refined, but it's basically there in the right place. And I'll group those shapes together. That way it'll be easy for me if I want to, you know, I'm using the white arrow to kind of just reposition that a little bit. And if I wanted to make the whole thing smaller, bigger, whatever, easier to adjust like this. And then she also needs reading glasses like me. So I'm going to place 2 points and then click and drag to make that curve there. These also need to be, black, I think, black stroke there, and maybe a little bit thicker. Okay, we'll do that thickness. Okay, so let's go ahead and Option or Alt, drag out a copy of that. Put this one right here, and then I'm gonna just make a crude little pen tool line there, and that will be the bridge of the glasses. Something I would probably spend a little bit more time working on later to make sure that that looks good together. And then I'll use the line segment tool to draw the earpieces there. Okay. All right, she looks mean and she needs a smile so that we know that she's going to really enjoy doing this audit and making you sweat. Okay, so I'm just using my pen tool again to make kind of a crooked smile, like that. And if I had a sketch, I could follow that sketch, but since I have finished art, it's easy to follow that. And I also want this to be green. All right, kind of like the nose there. And then she's going to need some lips on this mouth. She's got that kind of a crooked smile. I kind of have a crooked smile. Let's see. All right, so making a lip shape here. Again, I'm going to hold down on the Option or Alt key to break those curve handles. You'll be able to see this better if I make this a darker color. And then there's that a little bit longer, and just some adjusting here, which I could always spend forever doing. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that right now. But there we go. All right, let me make the bottom part. Oh, and again, you can use the space bar with anchor points too. So when I want to reposition this, as I'm drawing, just hold down on the space bar, then release the space bar and continue drawing. So you can just reposition and continue drawing. And the pen tool is my favorite, really. I mean, maybe a little less so now that I have Illustrator on the iPad, but I've used the pen tool for years, and I think it's a drawing tool to me. I think when I first started out, I was a little taken aback by it. It seems confusing, but the more you use it, the more it becomes yours. So, all right, so I've got her mouth. Let's do the brim of her hat, so I can kind of figure out like where the eyebrows are peeking out there, and that's got to be black. Okay, and now that I know where the hat is, I'm going to do some hair like that with the pencil tool, and let's make that hair green. Get rid of the fill. Okay. Oops, zooming in the wrong direction. All right, so now I'll just draw some strands of hair, and this is also some place where I would probably spend a little more time. Also, I'm drawing all of this using a mouse right now, so it's a little difficult, more so than I would normally. I would probably draw with a tablet for this. And I don't know, those don't look thick enough to me now. So I'm going to grab the lasso tool. I have this background shape already locked down, so it's easier for me to go, and I'll grab all of these. And I missed that one there, so I'm going to see if I can circle it. I'm going to wind up selecting. This is where there's a plugin from Astute Graphics that's really, really great for this, called Super Marquee. All right, so I've got all those selected, but I don't have it open right now, so I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to use the old Illustrator lasso tool. Okay, so I've made some of those strokes thicker, and let's group them together, and then I can send them to back. So I have them kind of all as a unit there, and I'll try to figure out where they might fit. Let me get rid of the straggler there. And then I'm just going to copy paste in front and flip it over. Again, I wouldn't do the same thing on both sides, but for the sake of moving fast here, I'm going to do that. All right, actually I kind of like that. Maybe make it just a little bit thicker. Let's see what happens if it's 13 points, 14, 15. I kind of like that too. Okay, great. Now I'll put another layer of hair behind that has a darker color, that dark green. And this way, when I put this behind, sending it to back with the keyboard shortcuts, then, I can play with this a little bit more and figure out a position for it. But just basically the idea of having something back there that's giving that hair just a little bit of background and depth. And I'll flip this around and select it. It's hard to select strokes when they're so thick like that, because of course you have to select the actual path instead of selecting, this area here where the appearance is, where the stroke weight is. All right, so we're going to go with that, and let's do one more shadow here. So I'm going to take this hat brim and option drag it down like that, and then change its color to green. And again, because it's a shadow, it's going to be multiply blending mode, and I can just dial that back a little bit. And here's something else. So normally, like I showed you on that peplum, on the suit shadow, I was able to use the shape builder tool to cut. But in this case, I can't really do that same cutting here for the reason that I was talking about just a minute ago, which is, what you have here, what Illustrator sees here is just a bunch of paths. The thickness of the stroke on that is not something I can use to cut here. I would be having to expand all of these strokes first into shapes that I could use to cut with. And I don't want to do that because I still have a lot of adjusting to do here, and I want to keep those editable. So I'm going to select this shadow and just trim it with the eraser tool like I did before. It's such a great tool. for this. So with the eraser tool here, just let's see, can't see the size of it. That's a good size. You can use the bracket keys. But I'll just freehand this, you know, maybe at another point, if I didn't like the way I did that, I could refine it later, but this is going to get the job done here. In fact, I'm just going to erase all this. And another thing about the eraser tool is you can see it just erases what you have selected. If I did not have this oval selected, then it would erase down through everything in the illustration. So it's helpful because you can sort of limit what you're erasing there. So I just was able to kind of custom cut with the eraser tool. And I'm going to put the brim back in front. And oh yeah, I think she really needs like a strand of hair in front here. So let me just go ahead and just put like that. Let's see. And then I'll put the brim back in front. And of course I have to have the shadow in front of that too. Okay, that'll do. Good to have your arranged shortcuts memorized. All right, and then she needs a triangle for the top of the witch hat. And she is really starting to look menacing in a fun way. Okay, there she is. Let's see, what else could we do really quickly? Okay, so here are some really super quick tips. This is making the brim of the hat. Anytime that I need something that I want it to be something that I can edit by using a stroke thickness here, you know, rather than drawing a brim shape, I'll just draw a brim stroke like this because I can come back here and decide later, do I want it to be flatter? Do I want it to be rounder? And how thick do I want it to be? So I use strokes all the time for lettering and things like that. Then I expand them. So let's do that. I'll expand this stroke by going up to the object menu, expand, and make sure that stroke is checked and click OK. And that way, once it's expanded, you know, and I want to fit it to the hat itself, then I can use the shape builder tool, Shift M, and hold the Option or Alt key to subtract and just trim off those edges right there. So expanding it gets you the shapes that you can actually work with. And here I'm going to put a gradient on this. So I've got this regular default black and white gradient. I'll put another color in the middle there and then just drag from my swatches panel some of these colors to the other stops here. So it's starting to have a little bit of a dimensional look there. And then if I look over at the original, she has a $sign and a calculator and so much more that I don't have time to draw here. But I'm going to show you one last tip that you might find helpful. So let's say I need a calculator. This is something that anytime I need something that has a little bit of a shape, you know, in perspective, I'll take a shape like this and go up to Effects and down to 3D and Materials. And instead of using this Extrude and Bevel, go to Classic because the new is a whole new feature, which is really great. But this is super useful and less complicated. So 3D Classic, Extrude and Bevel. And here you can just drag the shape around here to get the perspective that you want for, you know, where would that calculator be in space? And then you can say, okay, the extrude depth, right now it's 50 points. It's pretty thick. Maybe it needs to be 30, or let me go a little bit smaller like that. And then you can click OK and, you know, make any adjustments that you need to make. And then in the appearance panel, this is where this lives. So I can click on the effect, and it's still an effect. It's live. You can see that's the original rectangle, and what we're seeing here in space is just an effect. Now what I want to do is I'm going to expand it, but first I'm going to change the plastic shading, which is changing the colors of all the faces here. I'm going to change it to no shading. And click OK, because what I really want is the simplest, you know, just a few paths that I can work with. So take a shape like this, then go up to the object menu and expand appearance. And now what Illustrator has given you are just individual faces here, and that's it. Super, super simple, but it's already, kind of rotated like you want it. To me, it's a super shortcut for drawing anything, like this. And of course, I want it to be more cartoony, so I'm just gonna, futz with it like that, and maybe do something extra, but like that to me was probably quicker than me drawing it piece by piece. So I have the beginnings of a calculator. And then here, if I want to do like the calculator, the tape here, I've got a pencil tool. Let me get a stroke here and I'll make it white. And so I can just do the tape. I'm drawing this with, oh man, I'm drawing this with a mouse. So trying to draw something really fun and expressive with the mouse is kind of hard, but you get the picture. So then I'll just copy it and kind of like, maybe tilt it a little bit, try to, just make tape. That's looking kind of fun like that. And let me get my pen tool out and connect these over here. And Shift X to flip the stroke into fill. And, could certainly spend more time on that, but, it's the beginning of some tape. Okay, so much more to do, but there are a lot of tips in there I hope you can use. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video and got some useful tips out of it. You can give me a thumbs up and subscribe and find out when my next Illustrator video is coming up. I teach Adobe Illustrator here on YouTube and on my online learning community, and you can find out more about that on lauracoylecreative.com. Thank you for watching.